Listen to this sentence and tell me if you can spot the one huge mistake.
The old tree stood tall above the travelers, its gnarled, twisted, tangled tentacle-like branches pointed menacingly down at their tiny, itsy-bitsy, innocent little heads.
Were you able to tell what was wrong with that sentence? Because if not, I have some bad news. If your manuscript looks anything like that sentence, then every publisher and every editor is going to hand your manuscript back to you with red marks all over it, if they even give you the time to mark your work. The issue with that sentence is one crucial mistake that every writer makes. However, I do think beginning writers struggle with this in a profound way. I remember when I first started my creative writing degree and I got to my first writing workshop, and how that class really did everything it could to beat this mistake out of me. I even remember the first time that I realized just how serious of a mistake this was. We all have been going to our writing workshop for a while, and we all had to write our short stories and then bring them in with enough copies for everybody. And when you have 17 to 20 people and you have this 12-page short story, and you have to make 12 pages for 17 to 20 people, you end up with this giant stack that everyone's wheeling into class. And it's kind of like a Valentine's, remember in elementary school, Valentine's Day, where you have to go to everybody and give them a card with a little piece of like heart candy, right? It's like that, right? Everyone goes in this big circle and you get one short story on your desk. So your giant stack of just your short stories gets replaced by a giant stack of everyone's short stories. And then you all read them and give your advice and criticisms of that work. I mean, if you've ever been to a writing workshop, you've experienced something similar. And I remember that in this is our first writing workshop, mind you. We're all brand new creative writing students, and we've never really had a writing workshop of this type before. So our professor tells us to read, we're going to read this person's and this person's today, because you spend a lot of time on each person's writings. We all have it, and we're all going to read it over time, but we're going to work on 2 people's a day. And we read it, and then we start. And the professor went first, and he pointed out that one glaring issue. And when he pointed it out, everyone was like, oh yeah, that is a big issue. And it was such a big issue that we were able to notice it in the entire piece of work. It wasn't mine. It was a girl's piece of work. Let's just call her Jessica for now, right? So Jessica had this piece of work that she was super proud of, and I don't blame her because it was good in many ways, but this one big issue among others was what stood out to the professor. And when he pointed it out, it stood out to everyone. And then because it stood out to everyone and it was strewn throughout the entirety of the work, when it started going around the room as to what we think could improve the manuscript, everyone just started pointing out little things about it. And it was free reign. She was the first one, the lamb to the sacrificial lamb, right? So everyone's just throwing their shots at her, because we just realized how big of an issue this was. And her piece of work is right there in front of us, right? And then the second person's short story comes, and this girl's defeated. She's like, oh my, she looks like Rocky, she's got rocked. She's dizzy and can barely sit even. And then the next person comes here, and you look at them and they're like, yeah, mine's not going to be, mine's going to be great. And the same exact issue. That person leaves looking emotionally like they have, they're black and blue emotionally, right? They just got beat up, and the whole class feels invigorated having given all this advice, right? But then as the days went by, we went down everybody's story one by one by one. And we started with Jessica, and she had this issue. We went down the row, they had this issue. We went down the row, next day, same issue, same issue, same issue. Everyone's blowing up. Boom, boom, boom. We're all tearing everyone apart. Slowly, we stop tearing everyone apart, and you notice the next person in line is getting a little sweaty, realizing, oh no, I have the same issue. And it got down to me, and I had it too, and I got blown up. But everyone started getting nicer over time because everyone realized they had the same issue. And what was that issue? Everyone used way too many. And if you're a beginning writer, I'm confident you are too. And if you're an experienced writer, I know you're struggling with this. Everyone uses way too many adjectives and adverbs in their writing. So, yeah, you heard right. The biggest issue that I see with tons and tons of writers is the overuse and over-reliance on, well, adjectives and adverbs. Now, the purpose of an adjective and an adverb is to help the reader understand what you're talking about. If you want someone to understand they walked fast, you say they walked quickly or they just walked fast. If you want to describe someone as scary, you might say they scary person. If you want to say someone small, you might say the little person or the small person. They are useful, but the thing is, people overuse them. And they also use adjectives and adverbs that are not as good as they could be. Like I said, if I say small person, well, how small, right? Small to me might be different than small to you. And there you can kind of see the problem I'm talking about. Just because something in your mind helps describe what you're talking about more doesn't mean it actually helps someone else. What happens a lot of the times with adjectives and adverbs is a writer will spend, 10 minutes just crafting the sentence with their galaxy brains. Wait, one second. Found it. Found him too. He's got to be right where he belongs. My students named him Bob, so that's Bob. Okay. Can you see that? My galaxy forehead. So yeah, you spend 10 minutes formulating this perfect, beautiful sentence that describes in the most high level of language used known to man, and with your galaxy brain, and then you look at it and you think to yourself, oh, how beautiful. And then someone reads it and they aren't nearly as excited about it as you. And it's probably because you relied on adjectives and adverbs to make your writing feel more artistic, right? Adjectives are good and beautiful and important, but when they're overused, it just sounds so boring. And I know that sounds like it doesn't make sense. Why would something that you would think isn't boring is boring? It's because writing, one of the powerful things of it is when you can get simple to say, you could say a lot more with a lot less, right? I would say Kurt Vonnegut is one of these people that can do it, but just because something is, you want to make something beautiful doesn't mean you need to overuse your adverbs and adjectives. I think it was, what's his name? I think my galaxy brain is 1 second, I need to cut it in half. My galaxy brain is shrinking. But, that's too low. Boom, my galaxy brain is shrinking. But it was Stephen King who said, the road to hell is paved with adverbs. And I would add adjectives. I think adjectives are even a much worse issue with most people's writings. But what happens is people write something and they think it sounds so beautiful and it's so flowery. It's actually just kind of tiring, right? I mean, just listen to the sentence that we had earlier. And then he's going to do it.
The old tree stood tall above the travelers, its gnarled, twisted, tangled tentacle-like branches pointed menacingly down at their tiny, itsy-bitsy, innocent little heads.
Now, listen to that same sentence next to that sentence rewritten with every adjective and every adverb taken completely out.
The tree stood above the travelers, its branches pointed at their heads.
Actually, I think there are a couple of adverbs in there still, but you get the point. The one that had less words said essentially the same thing. Even though there's way more words and way more descriptions in the first one, the second one had, well, about the same amount of information. The image of trees are used very often, and if a tree is standing above someone, then you can assume it's tall, and you can also assume it's old. Like I said, the image of trees are used super often, and we see trees almost every day in our lives. We know what a tree looks like, and trees are often considered old in general. We don't need to be told that every single time and at every opportunity. But either way, you essentially get the same image. Now, but you want to make it a better image. You don't want to keep it at its most basic, at its most simple. You want to evolve your writing to something better. But you don't want to do it by getting muddled with all these adjectives. Tons of adjectives are just so generic that they don't really help, and also so non-descriptive. It's if you say the old tree, well, how old? 5 years old, 1 year old, 16 years old, 1,000 years old, right? Old depends. I still have the tape on. I'm no longer Galaxy Brain Andrew LaFleur, so I'm taking that off. I'm now just normal dumb brain Andrew. So how old? If you say the young boy, to some people that might mean 5 years old. To other people that might mean 20, a young boy, right? You want to find ways to use your adjectives to be more descriptive rather than just adding a genre of vagary to them. Okay, they're young. Well, if you're 70, young might mean something different to you than when you're 16. When you're 16, you got to be pretty young to consider someone young, right? Also, using better nouns and better verbs and just better words to help illuminate what's going on to the reader, right? Check this sentence out.
The willow tree loomed over the travelers. Its branches wept over their heads.
Now, I would say that sentence is much better than the previous ones. Why? Because I got more specific with the nouns. I said a willow tree. I didn't say a tree, I said willow. And now, if you've ever seen a willow tree, I've informed you already. Willow trees are famous for being like the weeping willows, for these cascading, branches coming downward. So you already have that information about you. And I didn't say it stood, actually. I said it loomed. So when something's looming over you, it doesn't just stand over you, it's looming. It's this kind of lurching, like arcing above someone. And to loom over someone, you have to be quite larger. So I don't need to say the tree's big. I don't need to say the tree's old. It's gotta be old. It's gotta be big to loom, right? You don't get to loom unless you're tall. You don't get to loom unless you're over somebody. So by being more specific with my words, I use less adjectives and adverbs. And then your writing becomes more powerful. It says the same thing, but more powerfully. So I suggest you get more descriptive through your nouns and focus on that, and through your word choice rather than adding more adjectives and adverbs, because likely you're not even making your writing any more descriptive. You're just adding kind of qualifiers, which is more descriptive, but not enough. The young boy can be any age, because depending on who you are, young is different. Now, here's an easy practice for you to do. Take a page or a couple pages out of any manuscript you have and make a new copy of it, or if it's by hand, whatever, and just cross out or erase every single adjective, and then read it and tell yourself very honestly, does that accomplish the same thing? Because if it does, maybe keep it like that, and then go back through slowly and add an adjective and adverb where it really would help the writing. Because what happens is your writing relies on it rather than adverbs and adjectives helping your writing. Your writing needs to stand on its own before anything else. And if you lean on them too much, your writing will show that you lean on them too much, and publishers will notice. Well, thank you so much. I hope that my little piece of advice, get rid of your adjectives, get rid of your adverbs, or at least use them much less, really has helped somebody, either a beginner writer or reminded experienced writer, to keep that in mind. I hope you all have a wonderful and blessed day. This is the Lazy Writer, out.